What's up everyone, Soldier First Class here. In today's mission, I'm here to give you my easy guide on how to defeat the Midra Lord of Frenzied Flame boss fight in the Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree. I'll be giving you my build, strategies on how to beat the boss, and how to avoid some of his more deadly attacks. As with all my other guides, we'll be doing this fight with no Ashen Summons, but feel free to use them to help make this fight a little bit easier. But before we get started, if this guide helps you, be sure to light the bonfire on that like button. And for more Elden Ring DLC guides and content, subscribe to the channel with notifications set to all so you never miss an upload. Now let's get right into it. So let's talk about Midra and why this fight can be slightly frustrating. Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, does exactly what his name suggests and causes madness buildup to occur on almost all of his attacks. However, there are ways to make this buildup slower or neutralize it, but with my build and guide, hopefully you'll be able to focus more on dealing damage than worrying about the frenzy buildup. For my build, I went with the Great Sword aspected to Cold with the Lion's Claw Ash of War, the Fingerprint Shield with no skill Ash of War, and the Cold Misericord with any Ash of War just to have the cold element aspected to it. The Misericord is useful because it gives you added critical damage. Midra has the least amount of resistance to magic of the elemental affinities, and Frostbite is a status effect, so I wanted to cover both bases by making my weapons aspected to Cold. You could technically use Holy here, but you won't get the added bonus to the Frostbite burst damage, or the extra 20% damage for 30 seconds that Midra will take once Frostbite is active. As for talismans, I went with a few new ones I've only ever used for this specific boss fight. I used the Clarifying Horn Charm +2 for 180 extra madness resistance, Mottled Necklace +1 for another 60 madness resistance, the Dagger Talisman for 17% extra damage on all criticals, and Shard of Alexander for extra 15% damage boost on all Ash of War skills. In my Wondrous Physic, I went with the Stone Barbed Crack tier for easier stance break and Winged Crystal tier for light dodge rolling. I also used Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength as buffs, and then used Scholar's Shield to add more damage negation to my shield while guarding. This part is entirely optional, but Howl of Shabriri is still a really great buff here because you do 25% more damage. However, keep in mind you will take 30% more damage, but if you run decent armor and tank hits with your shield, you shouldn't notice much of an issue. This effect also only lasts for 40 seconds, so you may lose it before hitting phase 2 when he starts hitting harder anyway. Keep in mind that Flame Grant Me Strength and Howl of Shabriri are both body buffs, and you can't stack two of the same type of buffs at the same time, so try to mix and match and see which one works better for you. As for stats, I was level 227 with the following values: 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 43 Endurance, 80 Strength, 40 Dexterity, 21 Intelligence, 34 Faith, and 8 Arcane. Keep in mind you don't have to be this exact level for this to work, you just need to make sure your Fragment Blessing level is decently high. I took on this boss at a Blessing level of around 15 to 16, so that's roughly where I would recommend you be at. But now with that out of the way, let's discuss Midra's boss fight. You'll start out fighting a weak corpse that once defeated turns into Midra's final form. Midra not only does physical damage with his sword swipes, he also makes use of a few of the frenzy spells you've likely seen throughout the game. When the first phase of Midra begins, he's open to one massive attack when the screen fades back in. If you can get to him fast enough, I like to run up and unload on him with Lion's Claw, and after about 3 Lion's Claws, he typically gets staggered. Once staggered, switch over to the Misericord for a massive amount of critical damage. You may also get lucky and trigger the Frostbite status effect at some point, dealing even more damage and lowering his damage negation by 20% for 30 seconds. I've also noticed that if you're nice and tight to the boss, some of his attacks just flat out miss by going over your head. I wouldn't bank on this though, because some of his combos are fast and have different hitboxes to account for, and the point of this fight is to not get too comfortable to begin with. He also likes to coat his sword in Frenzied Flame and damage you while raising your Madness bar, and that's where the two new talismans come in. Focus is the stat that governs Madness buildup rate, and the higher it is, the more resistant to Madness you become. Midra also has a combo attack where he sprays Frenzied Flame in a conal-shaped pattern in front of him. To deal with this, dodge roll towards and either left or right of him. I had more success going right, but do whatever works best for you. The shield I'm using can tank some of these attacks as well, but it doesn't stop you from taking Madness buildup, so avoiding his attacks is more of an advantage than tanking the hits. When you get Midra down to about 50%, he'll enter phase 2. You'll know he's reached phase 2 when he lifts himself up in the air and starts to glow. To avoid this attack, as soon as you see him raising into the air, run as far away to the back of the arena as you can. He'll land in front of you, but it'll be far enough away that his attack won't hit you. Then he'll start spraying Frenzied Flame everywhere, which you can either run around to avoid or wait in the back of the arena for a time to run. This is also where he'll start to unload more attacks with his sword covered in flame. You'll want to get in nice and tight again and start unloading Lion's Claw or whatever your most powerful staggering attacks are, and after a few hits with those, he should be staggered and you can go in for another critical. He also has a spinning attack that I typically just tank with my shield, but you can also dodge roll through it to get behind him or try to avoid the extra hits. Midra also has a gap closer that can catch you off guard as it's slightly delayed, but you'll know it's coming when he begins to float slightly off the ground and flatten himself out in the air. You can either block this with the shield or dodge to the left or right to avoid it. I chose to just tank it with my shield because there was little risk for me in doing so. Keep repeating this process of staggering him and you should have Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, defeated in no time. This fight is one of the coolest fights in all of Soulsborne and has become one of my favorite fights in the entire DLC. It can definitely be frustrating, but hopefully this guide helped make it just a little bit easier. And if it did, be sure to light the bonfire on that like button. And for more Elden Ring builds, boss fight guides, and more, subscribe to the channel with notifications set to all so you never miss an upload. Thanks again for watching, I'm Soldier First Class, and I'm on to the next mission. Later, guys.